10. Cindy, please call the roll.
Yes. Ms. Steinkamp.
Here.
Mr. Sims.
Something is absolute.
Mr. McMillan.
Present.
Mr. Brisker.
Present.
Mr. Bordelon.
Here.
Mr. Henderson.
Get clear title.
You have a quorum. We've also got Anna Dow, Larry Benson, and Sandy Edmonds.
Okay.
Quorum. And I believe Hal has.
All right, do I have a motion before we start, please?
Madam Chairman, there's been a request that we move public comment back to the front of the meeting, and I would make that motion. To see, do we need to go 2/3 on it? Ask council exactly how we need to handle that.
Unanimous.
Unanimous.
We're going to do a roll call vote.
Do I have a second?
So moved.
Cindy, will you call roll?
We have a discussion.
Please.
I don't solicit, where are we asking?
Okay. We had before where the public comment was first, and then we did approve the minutes, and then Mr. Barnes and Mr. Phillips asked us to change it, and we did. But, and then we can't, so we have to move it back.
So you're voting just simply to
To
move the public
change
comment
it.
first.
To change the agenda.
So Mr. Bordelon.
Actually, I think, actually, don't we have to vote to put it on the agenda?
We're just doing to.
It's on the agenda,
We're
we're simply
moving
moving
the
it.
agenda.
We're simply moving it up to the first item.
So now it's the first
Motion
item.
is to move to the first item and approve it being public comment at the beginning of the vote.
Correct.
Yes, and we're going to do a roll call vote. Mr. Bordelon.
Yes.
Mr. Brisker.
Yes.
Mr. Henderson.
Yes.
Mr. McMillan.
Yes.
Mr. Sims.
Yes.
Ms. Steinkamp.
Yes.
Unanimous.
Motion. Okay, so we're going to start off this morning with public comment. Mr. Barnes, would you like to make a comment or two?
Yes, but I'm going to be quite brief because, as I'm sure you can detect, I've been under the weather for about 3 days now. I appreciate y'all having changed the order because this is not actually my comment. It's made on behalf of Reverend Phillips, who can't be here today because school schedule has called. School schedule calls for early dismissal. However, he has indicated that he wants the minutes from the last meeting to reflect that a request was made by Board Member McMillan to solicit the opinion of Mr. Bankston with regard to.
Excuse me, 1 minute, Mr. Barnes. Mrs. Barnes, could you have a seat for us, please? And if you want to step up a little bit to the side so she.
Yeah, just pull up chair.
So your mom can get you on camera.
Okay, that's fine.
Okay, there you go.
I appreciate
Right
that.
there, we can still stand here. Sorry to interrupt you.
That's no,
Okay.
that's no problem. He wants the minutes to reflect the fact that Mr. McMillan made a request of Attorney Bankston to state his opinion as to whether LALB's website should be added to the LALB website, and also to reflect that Mr. Bankston gave that opinion and the gist of his rationale for the decline to put it on the site. So I think that covers everything from him. I don't have anything to say other than I'm pleased to have gotten the unredacted invoices. I think they're quite revealing. I know when Mr. Bordelon wasn't here at the last meeting, I referenced the fact that you were quite emphatic with him that Mr. Bankston couldn't be put to work until that contract was signed on May 21st, and yet now we have conclusive evidence that you were in on the very first meeting on March the 7th or 9th, whatever date it was, 9th I believe. In fact, I believe it was a 3-hour meeting. So it would open the question of whether this board conducted an illegal meeting to hire Mr. Bankston, or whether he was hired without proper authority. Either way, I think it's problematic. It's nice to have the unredacted invoices to reveal that fact. I guess that's just about it, because my mind hasn't been for about 3 days, so that's about all I've got to say.
All
Thanks.
right, Mr. Barnes, thank you. Number. Any other public comment? Anyone else? Number 2, approval of minutes. Do I have a motion? Have a motion, do I have a second? Any discussion? have a
I
motion.
guess under discussion, would it have in there that you had given us the opinion on, what Mr. Burns talked about, the general comments, that, you felt as if when we were talking about doing the LAPA website, that your attorney's opinion was that we shouldn't do that. That's correct. Thank you very much.
Can I say, it's only going to be in the minutes if that was the motion. The motion was to not add the link to the website. So that's what is notated in the minutes.
That's what the vote is.
Right, correct.
But her attorney's part was not part of the motion.
All right, have a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye. Nay. Ayes have it. Okay, we're going to move on to old business. Number one, approval of tested auctioneer applicants. Can you take these one by one, Sandy?
Actually, if you want to take the first 5, you can, because they are all 100% complete and in order, or you can take them individually, however you'd like to do it.
We'll do that right now.
Senator, I would want to take all the listings through 5.
I will just point out that there are 3 that were apprentices.
That's,
That went to auction school. No, it doesn't mean that. The ones that were notated were apprentices who went to auction school. The other 3 are truly, or the other ones are just truly.
Let's just take them one by one if there's a question. Okay, let's start with number 1, Earl Holland.
Okay, he completed his apprenticeship under Joe Massey. All of his documents are in order.
Do I have a motion?
So moved.
For a second? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Ayes have it. Oh, and just a reminder though, please make sure your cell phones are turned off. Okay, number 2, Charles LaFleur, Opelousas, Louisiana.
Yes, he graduated from Burke Baker. Everything's in order.
Do I have a motion?
I'll make that motion.
Second? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Ayes have it. Number 3, James Kane.
James was an apprentice who ended his apprenticeship and went to auction school and graduated. And everything's in order.
So moved.
Second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Ayes have it. That was not Irving.
I'm sorry.
Oh, Kelly Payne on this one.
That's
Kelly Payne
right.
both.
Kelly Payne is also an apprentice that was just recently approved. He decided to go to Burke Baker and graduated, and everything's in order.
Do you have a motion?
Second.
Motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Ayes have it. Now, that's not her.
Esma, she graduated from Burke Baker, and everything's in order.
So moved.
Second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Number 2, approval of reciprocal auctioneers. We will take these one by one. Number 1, Barry Shackelford, Alabama.
Yes, Mr. Shackelford is present in the room.
Mr. Slack from Manheim, also a question arose, and I believe that the board, I had some questions from board members who wanted to do an interview pursuant to 3113P. And there has been a request as to whether or not the board wants to go into executive session and do that.
So moved to executive session. A second.
All right, you need a roll call.
Yes.
We're going to call the roll to go into
And let me make sure you understand the reason.
the purpose
Reason
for going
for
into.
the going into executive session is discuss character of the individual.
Discussion.
Has this applicant been given 24-hour notice whether or not he wants to discuss in public or in the executive
Yes,
session?
and he's expressed, and can ask me, just ask him again.
Yes.
He wants executive session.
Yeah, he does not want it to be in open session. Please, yeah.
This then you will have a motion and a second to go into executive session from Mr. Barry Shackelford. Please call the roll.
Yes, Mr. Bordelon.
Yes.
Mr. Brister.
Yes.
Mr. Henderson.
Yes.
Mr. McMillan.
Yes.
Mr. Sims.
Yes.
Ms. Steinkamp.
Yes.
It's unanimous. I was said anonymous.
Okay, so discussion and second, all in favor?
We're going to roll call it, just to
Roll
be
call.
consistent. Mr. Bordelon?
Yes.
Mr. Brisker? Mr. Henderson? Mr. McMillan?
Yes.
Mr. Sims?
Yes.
Ms. Nyken? Yes. Unanimous.
Make a motion that we give a shot at the license.
Do you have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Ayes have it. All right, number 3, approval of business applicant, Dalton's Grocery.
Mr. Shackelford?
Yes, ma'am.
Your license will go out in the mail tomorrow, but you can start auctioning immediately,
Okay,
okay?
thank y'all. Y'all have a good day. Thank you.
Okay, Dalton's Grocery, business applicant.
Yes, Dalton's Grocery, we have everything in order.
Tranquil.
They submitted a bond, but they had not signed it, so I returned the bond.
No, you know what?
Signature, so I would ask that you guys approve this pending receipt of that signed bond, of which I did keep a photocopy.
So moved.
Have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, so they're approved and pending the receipt. Yield the floor, okay. Okay. Number 4, apprentice guidelines. So this is basically what we talked about at the last meeting that we need to discuss where we stand on this. Do you want to need a motion for this? Or just open for discussion? Okay. All right, Sandy, will you tell us now, or Anna, where we stand on our apprentice rules?
Well, I can tell you what you have in your packet, and these are in order. You have something labeled currently in Louisiana Auctioneer's Licensing Board Rules and Regulations. So in other words, what's already adopted. There's actually nothing in the statute as far as guidelines for an
It
apprenticeship
just authorizes the,
other than what would be accepted on application. So you've got your rules and regulations, and then the document that has the
Basically,
seal.
this doesn't give a time how long sponsoring auctioneer needs to have a license.
Correct.
And that's basically the gist of this. How long?
That was kind of the discussion from
Right.
last time as to how long an auctioneer would
Does
take.
it?
I did want to point out to you guys, have like a little spreadsheet of some states that I gathered for you as far as how long they require their licensed auctioneer to be licensed before they can supervise an auctioneer. Alabama has 5 years, Florida 3 years, Kentucky 2 years, North Carolina 5 years, Ohio 2 years, South Carolina 3 years. There were a few states that don't have a rule or an apprenticeship program. Well, this was not of all of the states, but I have 4 states here on my list that have no apprenticeship program. Out of the 12 states.
Discussion.
Please.
I'm just going to tell you straight up, 1-year apprentice programs here in Louisiana, I'm not a big fan of. I think the auctioneer school is where you can get your education, it's where you can hone your skills, and it's where you can really learn about becoming an auctioneer. And if you're really sincere in being an auctioneer, you can do it in a very short period of time. I think our class was 9 days in Dallas at Texas Auctioneer Academy. It's an investment to be invested in, but we are, what I understand looking at this, minimum, everybody else has a minimum of 2 years, we're 1 year, correct?
No, well, you're confused. Wait, let me just make sure we're clear on this. This is how long the length of time the supervisor, the auctioneer, not the apprentice time. The apprentice time is 1 year. Right now, we don't have any rules or guidelines on how long the auctioneer. So if
All right.
I apprentice, I get my license, and then 2 weeks later, I want to have someone apprentice under me. That can technically happen, and that's been the problem. That's why this is under discussion. Because they were saying, well, maybe the auctioneer who supervises should be an auctioneer for at least 2 years before they can supervise an apprentice.
I guess I'll wait to the right on this. I would like to see us do it just auctioneer schools. If you look at the applications today, 2 of them tried to be apprentice, went ahead and went on auctioneer schools so they could get their license and go to work, in my opinion.
Well, like you just said, 9 days or 7 days, that can be a hardship on people to take that much time off of work. So I'm in favor of on this program. I do think the licensed supervising auctioneer needs to have a little experience before they do it.
Speaking of experience, I like to hear from someone with 40 years of experience. Let us know what he thinks.
Well, I've talked to total, I talked to 14 auctioneers, all of them, that I personally got their opinions. Most everybody I talked to felt like the supervising auctioneer should have a minimum of 3 years of experience. It must be established in the area that they operate. Established, that's a big word. The apprenticeship program, they don't have a problem with it as long as the apprentice is taught the same thing that an auctioneer is taught that goes to auctioneer school. I mean, what good is an apprentice program if you can't put a sale together, you can't close it, you can't sell it? I mean, just to give him an apprentice license and get up there and call an auction. If he doesn't know how to do the business aspect of it, you don't need to go out and auctioneer. That's their problem. I didn't write the law. I don't have a problem personally one way or the other with the apprentice bill as long as we're talking. The problem I have is the auctioneer that wants it, that has not either been in the auction business for a long time or has just been licensed recently. And they have asked for more than one supervisor to. Then I got a problem. Just to be quite honest, I got a telephone call Saturday from an auctioneer inside Louisiana. I don't know what all kind of auctions this auctioneer does. They have a very good reputation. And I'll say this as a lady, and she tells me, particularly around the state line area, around Bogalusa, New Orleans, there is a problem. We call them auctions. Some don't have license. I didn't ask for this. I mean, this has all been given to me Saturday. I didn't ask for it, didn't see it. Okay. Some crown auctions that don't have license. Apprentices working on one auctioneer, going over here working for somebody else, which is illegal. They can't do that. And I know it. And just problems in general. We got auctioneers coming out of Mississippi, Alabama, over there working Saturday night auction, Friday night auction, Wednesday night auction, not licensed.
Well, they need to report that.
Well, I guess that's what she called herself doing, reporting to me, so I'm reporting it to Anna.
No, you just need to give me the next one, because I'm very familiar with the Crossroads auction, which is just across the river, which is in Mississippi. But, you know, as far as I know,
I'll
they
find
have
out
not
all
crossed
of
the
it.
river.
The list is supposed to be coming to me, and I told her we would get on
Just give it to
it.
me and I'll take it.
We'll turn it over and do whatever has to be done. That's my opinion of the thing. Now, I did sit down and write some guidelines, I thought, I didn't know this other existed. But I wrote some guidelines, what I call the auctioneer. Doing the supervising should be minimal, and what the apprentice needs to do is minimal. And I think if you're gonna do the apprentice deal, we're gonna have to do something to make an extended, another part of this, to make sure they learn something. Like the auction business, just beside the small church business. That's my opinion.
Let me say something again. I'm concerned about this too, not the, concerned about the no license, but the apprentice license. What we have tried to do in the past is have some accountability for what the apprentice does over the year. The year portion is in statute. You have to do a legislature to change that. what you do, or what accountability, or what you provide to the board to utilize the conclusion of the executive test is up to this board to make a decision. So I think it's, basically something that the board needs to consider as far as what you expect the apprentice to do and what you expect the apprentice and the licensed auctioneer who handles it to turn into the board at the conclusion of the year. Right now, what do they give us?
Right now, they do submit to us, it's a tracking sheet where they keep track of what auctions they work in. It's just like a form. You put the date, you put what your duty was at the auction, and how long you spent doing that function, and the supervisor signs it.
Okay, so you do have some accountability.
Maybe, somehow or another, I went to auction school, like you said. Louisiana Auctioneer license, didn't exist. Maybe. Somehow or another, I failed through practice. I had to come take a test. Well, I've been to auction school, Keith Babb, Johnny Quinn, all that bunch was not easy on me. They put me through the whole 9 months. And that's when I got on this board and I found out that this test had been changed. It was a complete shock to me. Because I had to come down here the morning. There wasn't no ands, no ifs, no buts. You took the test the morning before the day, the morning after.
That's correct.
You had to be in that office at 8:30 to take a written exam. At 10:30, you had to do bid calling for 2 board members.
So that's just one movie.
Well, when I done it, it was Keith Babb, Johnny Quinn, and Larry Nobles. Those were 3 that were there. Now, I had, in that test, I had to put a sale together on paper. Contracts, the consignments, the lot numbers, the settlement sheets, everything. And fake checks to pay the consignments. And all this was jumbled up in a sheet that you had to pick it out. Okay? That's what I'm talking about these apprentices. If they don't go to auction school, I'm auction. There's no kidding me. I'm not around here.
So are you saying you want to go to auctioneer school?
I'd rather go to school personally, but it's in the statute, so, like I said, I don't have a problem with them being apprentices, as long as they're taught. If somebody like Marvin Henderson teaches them, or Keith Babb, I know they're gonna be taught. Because they don't want no.
But you can't say there's only a few people that can do it.
I'm just using them for example.
Right.
Because I know them. Because I work with them. And I know what they do in the country. And, all I'm saying is this, it needs to be an extensive test for the apprentice.
So you have 2 different tests.
No, we have a second part of the test. We have a second part of the test. It's not, it's all one test, but it's just a separate component that goes in with the second. There's a
If you
apprentice.
take, if you're apprentice, you have part B.
You have
That's what
part
you
B.
recommend.
That's what I'm recommending. You have part B, that's where they have to describe how to put a sale together, put a contract, sign, how to do lot numbers, how to do purchase sheets, the whole 9 yards. That's all I'm saying. You gonna learn the same thing in auction school.
Now you have a question.
Well, and after listening to Jim say, I believe he would probably be partial to agree that we need to do away with the apprenticeship program if it wasn't mandated by legislative action. And maybe we need to look at what it takes to change the legislative action so we can do away with it. But in the meantime, we've got to put some teeth into it with at least a 3-year established auctioneer training these apprentices. Another thing that bothers me too, and it's another burden that we have to look into, is who's policing these folks that they are apprentices? we have a tough enough time policing unlicensed auctioneers.
Right.
Who's policing that to make sure that these apprentices are doing what they have to do? That's one of the problems that is solved with an auctioneer school. You are there and your time is being logged and you have a certificate when you come out of there after that period of time. So I think that eliminates another problem.
Well, to answer your question, who's policing? Well, that's why you are sponsored by this auctioneer, and that auctioneer has to be in the room when you call. So allegedly, as a licensed auctioneer, when you take on that responsibility, that's the responsibility of the licensed auctioneer to supervise the apprentice. That's why there's one licensed auctioneer per apprentice.
We're putting a lot of responsibility into that licensed auctioneer.
Right.
He's only got 1 week, he's been in the auction business and he's.
Exactly. That's
So
why we're talking about the
that's
length of
something we
time.
absolutely have to change pretty much quickly, in my opinion, to make sure that we have established auctioneers. And then even at that, make sure that those auctioneers and apprentices are on the same line of thought that we want this board to be able, the board wants them to be on in order to become a licensed auctioneer.
Well, before, when we did this, we would have the licensed auctioneer and the apprentice come into the board and they would state that they understood and they understand all the responsibilities. What do you think, John? 3 years?
If you look at the recommendations I made, mine, policy, it's in the back.
It looks like this, Jeff.
Jim wrote those.
There were several states that I spoke
Thank you.
to that do have an apprenticeship that's 2 and 3 years. Hardly anyone else has a 1 year.
It's in the back.
All right, so if we want to make a motion to make some changes, and
Yeah, we would promulgate the regulations, and once you tell us what you want, and let me say that, I think you need the mature auctioneer, in the question, but you have some auctioneers who got auction more than a few times a year. So you may want to look not just the number of years you've been licensed, but how much of this is your principal business, what else do you do, et cetera. You have a lot of guidelines to determine how many times this apprentice would actually auction during that year. Also, if Jim wants us to get information with regard to actually doing the paperwork, of course, nowadays, a lot of auctions use computers. Yeah, we aren't doing the handwritten, and math as a result got to be less of an issue. Usually math is the test. So that's my question. If you want us to produce evidence of the actual workup that an apprentice has done, you can do that. You can say, I want to see your actual paperwork from this auction, et cetera, that you prepared and be able to explain it to the board if necessary. There's a lot of accountability issues I think we need to put into this, as well as the number of years. So I think it should be equal to an education.
Right now, you call 5 auctions for apprentice work.
I agree with that. On the other hand, I don't know what they're teaching in schools today. I don't know, you're talking about somebody who's coming out of an auction school with absolutely no experience, but obviously we can't let them practice auction.
That's why we say the supervising auctioneer is above 3 years experience. That's why we're bringing that into this. Most auctioneers I talk to, the well-established auctioneers, let me put it that way, they want 5 years. And before you can even train them. But me talking, I was able to talk most of them down to 3 years. It's not a 50-50 deal, 3 to 5. Everybody in my area is pretty much agreed on 3 years. The 2 of them said they'd go along with the rest, because the rest of them was too.
The majority of the apprentice applicants, just so you guys have information, since I've been here, the majority of the apprentice applicants are already in the auction business. They are already the clerks, they're already the ringmen, they're already part of auction businesses. So if that just helps put that out there for you, because I know that's not information that's presented to you when you approve applicants.
I really said it was good, if you wanted a ring at least 6 months or something, 6 months.
I would probably adopt your guidelines.
Well, I mean, they need to be written by an attorney.
Well, we're gonna put it into regulation form.
Yeah.
Rather, I can do a vote on that.
All I do is jot down notes and what I've been exposed to in 40 years and what I was exposed to when I got here.
And I know it's a lot, but I ask you to kind of read that into the record of what we're looking at.
You mean the,
The whole thing read in the record.
Well, she can put it, she can type it into the record.
yeah, we
Yeah.
can
Save
incorporate
time.
this into the minutes.
Right.
And you would need to vote to authorize us to prepare the necessary paperwork for the regulations and probably able to follow with us.
Just say this, that have y'all promulgated rules before? Well, the process ends up being, they're published in the register. And then there is an official comment period where they come and nobody sees the register generally, but you can send it out. And there's a comment period, and then you have a chance to, if there's no objection, that gives the legislative committee that has regulation over this, the ability to have a hearing if somebody really bugs about it. You see, that's the process. The rules are adopted by the board, and then the legislature has the opportunity to say, this is inconsistent, or we don't like it, or whatever, so whatever.
Yeah, we sent a copy to the Commerce Committee.
So I do have one thing on here, they're working on an auction ringmaker. You're a gallery auctioneer.
We'd have to have
Put
various.
some verbiage in there to take care of the
There's
gallery.
gallery auctioneers. Okay.
No, I should take care of the gallery.
Right.
I'm not experienced in galleries, okay?
No, we can add that to make this across the board, and I assume we want to apply it to every gallery.
And
Okay.
I have a question on the apprenticeship program. When we do the apprenticeship, are they allowed to take any kind of pay to their work?
I don't think we've ever had a restriction that they could not be paid, especially if they've already worked for that auction in the past.
I can tell you that after my auctioneer school, our auctioneer was running the school, Mike Jones said, go back home for the first 2 years, you don't take that, you don't get that experience.
Well,
Some people can't afford to do that.
You can use services and still get that. And let me say this, if you have distinct requirements listed in the regulations, then if we need to go to spot checks on apprentices, see what they're actually doing, we can do that.
Okay, so.
And one other thing while I'm in discussion, I still would like to see us looking at changing legislative action. We did away with the apprenticeship program. Am I the only lone voice in that? Or is there a consensus on this board to get our attorneys to do that for us?
And we couldn't do it till next year, so we have time, you know, since the
Okay, so we can discuss that amongst us and make decisions at that point.
You really have something come before this board. Well, since I've been on here, not once, but twice, that we've had to sign paperwork, that read paperwork, that the governor's office is pushing for veteran affairs to become auctioneers.
Yes, and it's fast,
It's my
that's
saying.
exactly.
So, I think we're going to have a look at how to do some principle out of the law, because from what I do, it's been part of the law since the statute.
It's been there, yes, as far as I
I
know.
mean,
The board was-
Hal, I know where you're coming from, and I agree with you 100%. I think it needs to be on. But
And let me say this, we can make the apprentice program as stringent to some extent, not as much as a school, but at least make the requirements such that we're sure that they're getting an education as an apprentice.
I know that plumbing apprenticeship to me is too long. You can't find a plumber no more, because nobody,
we don't have a union to be 5 years.
it's 5 years.
Okay, so do we need a motion?
Motion authorizes you, if you want us to use this, what we'll do is we'll draft it up and it'll come back for the board for review and approval. At the next meeting, we want it that soon, and then we go through the process that you referred to, where we have to promulgate it, post it, publish it. It will go to the two committees in the legislature, and then we will go from there.
All right, so do I have a motion? Any other discussion? Al,
I'll just give you a motion.
Jim?
I'll make a motion to
But I will say,
the apprentice guidelines established around what I have written and what we already have, existing guidelines to be incorporated together.
I have a motion, do I have a second? All in favor? Opposed? Ayes have it. Okay. Let's move on here. Approval of apprentice applicant.
We have Selma Ray Mangham. He is the brother of Belinda Rhodes. Belinda did go to Texas Auction Academy and was licensed by this board in
Doesn't she already have one apprentice?
She does have one apprentice, her son, which was approved at the last meeting.
I move to deny.
Oh, wait, come on.
Well, that's in the auctioneer.
Selma, how long has she been licensed?
Belinda has been licensed just since, just since November, it was either November or January. It was November. Belinda was licensed on November 6th.
And
She has an apprentice, her son, that was approved at the
she
last
wants
meeting.
two apprentices?
She wants two.
Okay.
I had this discussion with her already, that it's the board's discretion.
I just don't get a motion.
Yeah.
Was no action.
Right.
Deferred action.
You know that's important.
Okay, well, so you make a motion to
Deny?
deny. Do I have a second?
you want me to accept.
Have a second.
Discussion. This place absolutely right in what I was just talking about. Absolutely, she got out of school in November, she got one apprentice and wants another. And how are we gonna police that to make sure her apprentices are getting the education they should have?
Really, I won't go as far as say this. I think, Lord, today we ought to draw a line in the sand, not issue three more apprentice licenses until we get these rules and regulations in effect. Then consider.
It's going to be about, maybe it's going to be a year.
Let's just, okay, let's stay on this one, and then we have another one to come up, so.
You were waiting on that.
I have a motion to deny and a second. And any other discussion? Anyone else?
I got one discussion. Well, how did we, I wasn't at last meeting, so how did she get approved for apprentice last
It
meeting?
wasn't last meeting.
It was at the January meeting.
It was tied in to some others.
Oh,
It was tied in to some others.
so it wasn't individual.
What happened is, she was licensed in November. In January, the application came before the board. It was tabled to the next meeting until some research could be done. So that was January, so it was tabled until March. In March is when her son was approved. The day after the March meeting is when this application came.
Question, I wasn't at the March meeting.
Without having to rewrite the entire stuff on all the apprenticeship programs today, can we make it 3 years? Or does that have to be advertised? Could we take board action and make it 3 years?
Auctioneer has to promulgate
regulations.
Right.
This is a discretionary.
One
Okay,
second.
but you
But this is
discretion.
We have discretion to make it,
No, you
No.
have discretion to deny people to do whatever you want.
but we can't.
You can't adopt a
No.
rule without it being promulgated.
That's correct.
Thank you. One of the whole rules is from one side.
I know, that's the rule.
The court can come back. Okay, so I have a motion's been made to deny someone's apprentice in a second. All in favor to deny? Opposed? Ayes have it. Okay, we have another approval of the apprentice applicant.
Yes, we have Sean Latab, who is supervisor would be Terry Shirley. Do you want to speak on this?
Let me say this briefly, we do a background check on each individual, and we did one on the apprentice. And it was learned that Mr. Latab has an old sales tax lien. In 2007 from the city of Central. The statute says that we base a denial on a judgment. of sales tax. This is not a judgment, it is a lien. So it has not been reduced to a judgment. I don't know that it ever would be, but I didn't want to make the board aware of that. It was not on an auction business, obviously it was not licensed. It was on another type of business.
Don't we have auctioneers doing lien?
Yes.
We have a lot of,
But this was specific, since the statute refers to sales tax. I did go pull it to make sure, and it is showing an active lien on for sales tax. But it would pay too, so.
Do we have a motion?
Does Tuesday know this yet?
You would have to ask it that.
Well, you would. I need a motion.
To accept.
Or deny, I am in the motion.
Or discuss.
Yeah.
Oh, I got
Discuss.
one, okay, I'll make a motion to accept, discuss.
I'll second that.
Okay, so now it's.
Who's Terry Sherman? Give me some time frame on their experience.
Terry Shirley is a former board member. He's been licensed for a long time. He's the instructor at Burke Baker, which is an approved auctioneer school with this board.
And he was the investigator, so he's well aware of this.
Thank you.
Retired state trooper.
Yes.
Very good.
Yeah? No? Anyone else? All right, I have a motion to approve and a second. All in favor, say aye. Opposed? Ayes have it. New business. All right, new business. Number one, approval of financials, current fiscal budget.
Yes, Darlene couldn't be here, but in your packet, she's the treasurer, but in your packet, you do have the current fiscal budget. You also have a proposed budget for 2013, 2014. Both need to be approved. On the current budget, you can see that the goal is in the far right-hand column to not exceed 102%, other than income. Income is unpredictable, but none of our expense categories cannot exceed 102% of budget. And looking at the set bills and things that we'll pay, the only category that's going to exceed that 102% is our legal department. So I'm asking the board to allow me, once bills are paid during the month of July, to adjust the budget, move some money from capital outlay to the legal line so that we fall within that 102%. Of course, that needs to be submitted to the legislative auditor's office. That will be aware.
I'll make that motion.
I have a motion and a second. Any questions, discussion? With that, all in favor, say aye. Opposed? Ayes have it. So is that it, Sandy?
Yes, so can I ask you, was that motion just to allow me to adjust
Yes.
it? And so can I get you to approve the current budget
Yes.
and the proposed budget?
Move to approve the current budget.
Second? All in favor? Opposed?
I'll make the motion to accept the proposed budget year 2014.
Second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Ayes have it. All right.
That concludes our business.
Number two, attorney report, investigative report.
There'll be hearing, Mr. Rankin, meeting after conclusion of the request for last time of the reviewer. We do have some ongoing investigations, none of which the court will be set for hearing, except for the one I believe we'll discuss with.
Okay. So, number three, approval of professional services contracts.
Yes.
We have Anna Dowler, Livingston, Louisiana Department of Justice.
Our professional services contracts run on a calendar year, which ends June 30th, so we're required to provide new contracts. So I do have contracts ready, and if you guys are ready to approve those, Anna in the amount of $15,000, Larry in the amount of $25,000, and the AG's office, the Louisiana Department of Justice, in the amount of $10,000.
Let's take them separate. First one, Anna Dow, 15,000. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Do I have a second? Any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Ayes have it. Number 2, Laurie Bangston, 25,000. Have a motion, do I have a second?
Second. We took that.
Okay, second. Any discussion? All in favor, say aye. Opposed? Ayes have it. Number 3, Louisiana Department of Justice, 10,000.
So moved.
Have a first and a second. Any discussion? All in favor, say aye. Opposed? Ayes have it.
I have contracts that need signing and witnesses, so after these attorneys sign.
After the next election of officers, we'll take a 2-minute break, and we can do that. All right, let's do number 4, election of officers for 2013 fiscal year. We need to do number 1, the vice chairman, and number 2, secretary and treasurer. For vice chairman, do I have a nomination?
I'll nominate Mr. Sims.
Do I have a second? I need to call roll, which is all in favor. All in favor? Opposed?
Well, I'm gonna vote for
Opposed? Ayes have it. Congratulations, Mr. Sims, you're vice chairman again. Number 2, secretary treasurer. Do I have a motion to nominate?
Here's the one that gets trained, Darlene Jacobs.
Have a motion for Darlene and a second for Darlene. Any discussion? All in favor, say aye. Opposed? City, please tell, congratulations, Jacob, she's the secretary treasurer. Again, we are going to take, we need to take a 5-minute break before we get to Ms. Barnett. We're just going to have a 5-minute break. Please remember to keep your cell phones off. Okay, number 5. Robert Barnett's request to discuss requirement of LAU's motor vehicle to hold an auction license from their office in addition to an auctioneer license. How are you?
Good.
Have the floor.
I appreciate your opportunity to address you on my Louisiana. And the issue I want to, I have 2 issues I want to address. The first being the dollar commission issue. The dollar commission, for the, that you may not know, regulates auto sales. And they've been regulating the auctions, but only as we have a dealer's license and a salesman's license, which is $400 for the dealer's license, $29 for the salesman's license. I don't own an auto dealership. I don't sell cars on a lot of cars.
Sorry. You need a chair? Oh, okay.
I don't sell cars off a lot, so then about 2 years ago, they came up with another license, and it's called an auto auction license. What I'm hoping to do is have the board look into this and see what we can work out with the auto commission. I don't have a problem paying the auction license, I'm not paying a dealer's license. I don't have a dealer's lot to sell cars. So to me, right now, we're being no hit as far as an auction license. Not one who's going to regulate them. License, I don't lose the auction license. We're being regulated as for an auction license with the auto commission. It's almost, no, it's not almost, it is definitely kind of looking on that. Forwarded per license. So on page 825, actually, I think it got somehow through a year or so, it was in our county, we got the bill got paid out county, so it was for this year. Jeff and I talked about, he actually bought something through the RV sales, but that's not the case at all. So, so I would like to ask the board to look and see how that can be that we're getting, an auction license from the auction board as well as the auction board. So that's my first issue. Can we address the second, and we'll talk about it, or?
Talk about the first issue?
I want to know what the statute says.
The statute says that, first of all, if you're an auctioneer selling cars, it's not your principal business, and you don't need to. What we did some years ago was to work with these motor vehicles, and they did look at the statute that if you are not in the principal business of selling cars, and they list estate sales, bankruptcy sales, et cetera, that kind of thing, but it's not limited to that. Then you do not need to use motor vehicles to choose your auction. what they did is exactly right, though. If you are in business, then they started to use dealer's license, and they also now impose an auction license for public wholesale and salvage auction, which is separate and apart, which should have documented on it. Because that is, they have added that as a separate license. They did not tell us about that when they did, they didn't. They didn't ask us. See, the statute didn't change, the form did. So they're, instead of getting one or the other, and do you sell cars just as a dealer, just
No,
a lot?
no, they're not paying the license
Did
because
you
they're
accept
telling.
them as consignments in the general public?
Have you asked them whether or not that you need both?
And they told me I have to have both, and in fact, Ronnie Weiser is mine. Every area has an auto commissioner. Ronnie Weiser being mine, I discussed it with him, he says I need to bring that to y'all. We get the two boards together, we can't just go, it's still saying, we get two boards together to resolve this issue. You know, I don't have a car dealership, I'm not selling cars off the lot, you should walk on my lot and buy a car, I only sell that auction. So, it's kind of, it's a double hit.
Yeah, and I don't know why they're doing it twice.
As part of the state or just?
No, I mean, we just run a public auction, where we sell dealers or individuals.
Yes, she has a principal business in
Right.
it.
But it's only an
That
auction.
you have to.
But I'm being licensed at auction and as a dealership.
Yeah, her complaint is not that she doesn't have principal business and they're acquiring it. That has been resolved. What the problem is that they're requiring her both to have a dealer's license and an auction license.
And a sales license.
And a salesman. That, and the dealers and salesman and the auction salesman I understand, but I don't understand all three. Because they do distinguish the types of license you have in the statute. This basically, the way they did the statute, the way they did regulations, is basically saying, you know, here's your dealer's license, here's your auction license. They never said, you must have a dealer's license and an auction license to run only an auction. Now, obviously, I think their concern is that if you have an auction license, if you try to sell it outside the auction, you need a dealer's license. So I can see that as an issue, but they've never expressed to us, they've never talked to us about the double dip, and they never, you know, until she formally approached the board, I was not aware that they were charging both, just first. But the other one, you get one or the other, not charging both.
Does the rule say anything about their authority to do that?
It's fine, do y'all ever auction real estate? And you don't have to have a real estate license for that either.
I am a licensed real estate.
But you don't have to, that's what I'm
You
saying.
know, that's a great line there too.
Not Louisiana.
Well, that's what the auction board says, but that's not the real estate board says. So again, you have two boards that are not on the same page.
Well, I agree with you on the auto bill too. I mean,
Okay, so we can
you
look
have
at.
15 million licenses.
Well, that's the problem I'm running into is I have an auto license, I have an auctioneer's license, I have a real estate license, I have a firearms license, and then I'm licensed in other states, and you can just license us to death.
Right.
So it has to stop somewhere.
So you're looking at nothing more?
Yes, we certainly will try to set up a,
Looking now, I think we need to
set up.
overhaul it. Representatives from them
Yeah.
and our next board.
yeah, I don't think that, or we can sit there and have a representative, this board, talk to a representative, therefore, see what the problem is and why I don't understand it. Do you see anything in that that's no?
I'm seeing it.
Why don't we let our attorney talk to their attorney?
Yeah, that, we can do that. They have multiple attorneys, I can find one that will talk to.
I have, well, then you'll.
Yeah, I'll talk to
Get their
them.
position
Yeah.
and report back to us for the next.
Thank you, that was just my first issue, so I request the board look at that. The second item I'd like to bring before the board is the regulation of online auctions, sealed bid auctions.
I don't know if that's on the.
It
It
is. Internet auctions, this is Barbara by next.
Next item.
But it's what Barbara added that.
I actually requested them to propose. So maybe it's interesting.
So we're going on 6.
Yeah.
We're going to move on item 5 and have our attorney do that. We need a motion second to do that, or should we just start doing it?
You just redo it. Right, it's just, she's gonna report back, she's just getting information, she's not
I think we ought
doing
to have a
it.
motion to disagree that we don't agree with the automobile deal, and vote on it. And then that way she can tell them our board voted against it.
I like to make a motion.
Yeah.
As a resolution, or
Yeah.
Okay.
Resolution.
Go ahead, Greg.
All right, let me think about it for a second. I would like to make a motion for us to, let the Louisiana Used Motor Vehicle Commission that we do not believe they should license auctioneers whose primary business is not the automobile business.
You send a resolution.
Right.
Any other discussion? Okay, I have a motion and a second.
Just in that discussion, that with that passage of that our attorney speaks to their attorney.
Well, yeah, that was gonna happen.
Yeah, that way she'll say our
She's
board
gonna do
voted.
that.
Then the board set up.
Put that.
All right, so I have a first and a second, and I assume you're clear on my motion.
I'm going to get it fully off the record.
Okay. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Ayes have it. Okay, let's go on to number 6. Ms. Bonnet requested to discuss internet.
Internet auctions. I'd like to see if we can request that the board look into the regulation and licensing of online auctions. The reason I saw this board a few years back, or several years ago, and at the time, this came up. But then, at that time, we were fighting eBay, and they didn't have enough money, or we didn't have enough money to fight eBay. Well, eBay is no longer an issue, because they're not going to basically run an online auction, or they're just going to buy it now. So that's done wrong. But what we are
Still
still
doing. They're still doing bids, but
There's some
not.
of it's right, but it's not,
They backed off.
they back off.
With the consigners. They don't, I had looked at the agreement recently, that changed.
But now what we're seeing is all these online auctions going. Here's an example. Realtor runs an auction. Well, he's going to do a sealed bid auction. It is an auction, title's an auction, it's advertised as an auction. And he doesn't have like another, in fact, I'll tell this. If you go, there's several sites, whether it's Facebook, whether it's LoopNet, whether it's Auction Time, the equipment is being done almost in every aspect. It's called an auction. It's taking bids as an auction, they're raising a bid, they even talk some, it's not even talking about absolute reserve. But yet they don't have to have a license. So when there's an issue, where are they going to go to? They're going to go to the auction board, they're going to go to, actually some of these they do, but there's one really one. So when there's going to be an issue arise, who are they going to go to? And then when they screw up, well, it's my profession that they're tarnishing the value to it. I've been an auctioneer 30 years. I've been doing continuing education all the time. I'm licensed. And then we have these folks that just can go in and not have any education, no license, no regulation. We can tarnish our business or industry reputation. I do know that I waited last week to start doing checking, but I did check this morning. Kentucky and Pennsylvania are currently regulating, I know Nebraska's looking into it. It's a lot of states are now looking into regulating online auctions. This is what you're seeing. I grabbed some of those off of Facebook this morning. Looked at, trying to grab it. I think because they don't have an auction room, I wasn't able to do that, but like I said, it's done in every phase of the industry, whether it's equipment, real estate, antiques, collectibles. And I do realize it has to go through registration, and the session's not to next year, but we're looking at it right now to be able to try to get something back to the legislature.
You're right, I remember when, I was with you as well, when we were trying to do the debate.
I'd ask your vice attorney, and y'all give us some type of either information or what we can do about this, how we can professionally handle this. It looks like a duck, it's quacking like a duck, it's an auction.
No, it's an auction. There's no question, we can regulate right now. We cannot regulate an auction house unless on the internet. If it is emanating from the scheduled Louisiana service over here, or the person calling the auction is here. It's, I don't know that we don't have the power to break it. I was not aware of this. And I'm not sure who these people, is it all coming from one? No, I mean, there's tons of them. I can't get it myself.
There are license auctioneer.
Yeah, there are license auctioneer, I have a problem with it.
Will they just put their license on there? And they're a licensed auctioneer?
No, that's all.
I didn't even realize that, I just told my sister, pull this up, so I'm not gonna use it.
Some of these may already be licensed, and you look into them, others. That's true, and some of these are a little questionable as far as behavior. The statute says for an auction means the sale by competitive bid of any property which sale consists of a series of invitations for offers to purchase property made by the auctioneer and offers to purchase made by members of the audience culminating in acceptance of the auctioneer of the highest or most favorable bid. That's the definition of auctioneer. What we amended, or what eBay has amended, was auction house. And the pertinent part of this, a public livestock auction business which exclusively auctions livestock and which is regulated as a public livestock market by the Livestock Standing Board pursuant shall not be defined. It also auction house, auction company, auction business shall not mean an entity which sells property through an internet-based trading platform unless such activities constitute an auction as defined in paragraph 3, which is what I just read to you. So if they're live and taking bids,
They should have a business license.
yes.
They should have.
Well, if you read it, somebody printed the information on it, it says if you have a problem, they're regulated themselves.
They're not regulating themselves, they're basically unregulated. And the problem always is locating them. We've had some of these before, because they don't post a lot of proven or correct or easy to find information.
I can tell you they're easy to find.
Okay, well then, I'll take these and we'll start looking a little bit more at them.
They have an administrator, you can contact the administrator, and that's those, but even, I mean, that's just one issue. I know what you're saying, if it starts, if the company is in Louisiana, Nebraska's doing this right now, and it has to do with auction place, because that is where they're located at. I think what I would like to see, even as a voter, I mean, they should have to have an auction license. If they're going to call a seal bid, if you're going to open those seal bids, you're going to raise the bid,
That's an option.
it's an auction.
If we catch that, we do regulate. We got enough.
Well, I called in, and I called Sandy, and she said seal bids are not regulated.
Seal bids are not, they are specifically exempt, but seal bid does not mean calling back out and saying that, oh, here, I've got a bid of X, do you want to go up? At that point, it becomes fine.
They advertise it as an auction.
We got that all over the
I've dealt with some in Alexandria who told us stuff. Yeah, I don't know about any others because I haven't had any
I'll
calls.
start giving you information.
Never seen it to me.
And I was told when I got on board, it wasn't nothing to do about it, so I just do that.
Yeah. Yeah, eBay is basically defined as eBay. That was going against that number.
Just eBay and the statute.
eBay doesn't say it, but it's defined specifically to only include really eBay and a very few others. The other situation, however, is, I want to make you aware, if it's generated outside of Louisiana, we may not have jurisdiction. So that's, the feds are still looking at that and have not taken an interest in that. At one time, I understood federal authorities were going to go into looking at all auctions online and make decisions, but last I heard, otherwise, they're still sort of not ignoring the situation and not making a decision. But if it's generated inside the state, we can do something about it. If it's a real estate agent who is, basically, taking bids and then turn around and asking to raise the bid. They just take seal bids, that's one thing. That's not an option, that's
They're doing online, so.
Exactly, they're calling it auction.
If they're calling it an auction, and it looks like it's not, flash like it's not called. I just need to know about it. And I have had some come to me and I've taken care of it.
Well, about the seal bid real estate.
Sometimes, if it's sealed bid, and it's only sealed bid, nothing I can do about it, it's exempt from the statute. But if they open the bid and call up somebody, I got a bid of X, can I get a bigger bid? And I had a few people doing that in Alexandria, and I talked to them, I thought it stopped, so I.
Well, I'm not even aware of any of that, but he's doing something else, but.
Yeah, they were advertising it that way in the paper.
What I'm requesting the board to do is, one, I'd like to see some regulations on my auctions there, whether it's Alexandria, whether it's Toulon, wherever it's over the state, it's generated out of Louisiana. I'm for some regulation on sealed bid, because they're calling sealed bid, they're advertising their auction. And I know what you're saying, Anna, but I think there's still, I don't think the line is black and white. I think there's some gray area there, and they're doing it, so I'd like to see sealed bids. It's bid.
Well, sealed bids we had to get out of because of the state and feds who do sealed bids. They take position of those or not.
But you can exempt state and
I
federal.
understand.
Yeah.
But like I said, if it's a sealed bid.
And they're calling it an auction.
And they're calling it an auction, we normally
I
get involved.
understand.
And the other thing is that
I just need a complaint form filled out.
Right, and the other thing I think is really, if they're going to do an auction, they ought to, license.
Yeah, they have.
What is this you said about the real estate commission? In Louisiana, if you're a licensed auctioneer, you can sell real estate, there's no reason.
And she's talking about the realtors holding the auctions without the auctioneer.
Right, I'm talking about realtors auction real estate, but I also talked about if you call a real estate commission, you said you don't have to have a license, a real estate license to sell real estate by auction. That's this board's opinion.
That's the statute.
That's
Right, well, if you call
real
real estate commission,
that real estate commission, he worked with me. Call him.
I talked to real estate, I talked to one of the board members, and they approved it, and understand they do not have to have a license. Yeah, to auction real estate, so, which I do believe they do.
Yes,
So-
They did.
And I'll talk to real estate commission.
I Bishop Johnson, Robert.
Just announced that.
And so you want this finance to start a complaint form?
Yeah.
I'll email that to you.
Just send me,
Actually, I'm not trying to complain on anybody particular.
Right.
well,
I'm just saying, we need some regulation of.
Why don't we just have,
Right.
why don't we just have Jennifer with them?
you said you know about it.
No, you just want to-
I don't see the sack, I don't see the sack go out of North Louisiana.
And what's it say something about?
And then we'll.
It's in the paper,
Other
it's
than
in-
Tim Steele's looking. Okay. Thanks again, Barbara. Number 7. Discussion of Robert Burns and Freddie Phillips versus LALB. This may be an executive session.
You got some discovery on the Charles Evans case. So much. Waiting for some discovery responses back from the deposition set first.
The next meeting date is July 2nd.
We moved there.
To when?
July 9th.
Let's do it 4th of July weekend, everybody's plans.
My recommendation is July.
What day is July?
Tuesday,
Tuesday.
that's just 1 week further.
Does that work for y'all? Anybody have a problem? All right, so you want to make a motion?
Move, we meet on July 9th. Well, they doing that Louisiana municipal building.
You have a second?
Second.
All in favor, say aye. Opposed? Ayes have it.
One other thing, make sure that all the proper channels to get the word out, and make sure the meeting's
She
smooth.
posts, Cindy always posts
But I
it.
want to reiterate that.
She always posts it, puts it on the website.
Thank you.
Always. Okay,
Move, we adjourn.
adjourn to the hearing. So want a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
And a second, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Well, hang on.